An exhibit which has graced more than one film, a conflict which almost ruined a cult film of the past century, a search on the success of which the triumph of several dozen people depended. The Odessa Museum of Cinema exhibits. Until recently, the film shooting process was seething here and the premises resounded with director's orders. But today, the premises are crowded with tourists and one can hear the voice of the tour guide. Although this is the youngest museum in Ukraine, some of its exhibits are already several centuries old. Its visitors can easily go back a few centuries in time and touch an era about which they had read in books or watched on television. Leather, wood engraved by a fine craftsman. It was a very laborious work. It was treated with great care. Both the engraving and the analysis of the materials from which the chair was made attest to its considerable age. This is sort of a historical object from the 19th century. The cover is original, we haven't changed a thing. And here it is, preserved since that time. It's not just a chair, it's a genealogical chair. It belonged to one of the noble families. On the territory of Ukraine, there were plenty of them before the bloody revolution of 1917. Because it's a genuine, antique piece of furniture. It's not a fake and it's not a prop. But it's not the age of the chair, 120 centimeters high, 65 centimeters wide and 62 centimeters deep, that is unique about this antiquity. Nor is the name of its previous owners. This chair is unique because it was used in the Cardinal's room, and the room was used in the film D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers, directed by Georgy Yungwalt-Hilkevich.
Что делает король?
Это самая слабая фигура. Нуждается в постоянной защите.
How did the 19th century armchair end up in a 20th century Soviet film? What veiled fact was it meant to emphasize? In what other films was this chair shown? And what kinds of gag reels are connected with this chair? The Odessa Museum of Cinema exhibits opened in its contemporary form on May 23, 2017. This date coincided with the 110th anniversary of Ukrainian cinema and the 198th anniversary of the creation of the Odessa Film Studio. In general, the idea of creating a nice, full-fledged museum of the Odessa Film Studio is a matter of remembering the good history of the Odessa Film Studio and the opportunity to thank those people who have worked here for 110 years. The national cinema originated here. Actually, this is the place where Ukrainian cinema appeared in 1907 at about this very spot. Back then, a photographer named Miron Osipovich Grossman founded the private motion picture studio Mirograph. Another private motion picture studio, Mizrak, opened in Odessa 7 years later. And in 1919, the private film studios were expropriated and merged into one national film studio. Therefore, it would be strange if there was no Vera Holodna room here or mementos of such famous movies as Spring on Zarechная Street or D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers, well, and so on. There are a lot of them. The meeting place cannot be changed. This is the idea, to keep the memory.
Посмотри, какой типаж! Он подойдет, только надо сидеть. Давай, переодеваемся. Где усы? Усы где? Вот сейчас темняшечку, ага. Скорее в кадр. Вот, ну, совсем другое дело. Внимание! Приготовились! Начали! Это моя роль! Самозванец! Это я поручик!
The exhibits of this unique museum are the props that were used in particularly well-known films. This chair is among such well-recognized props. This chair made a debut in 1963 when it appeared in the studio's film Alone. The 1964 film Alone is a typical Soviet propaganda film, centered on the victory of the Bolsheviks in the Tambov province during the Civil War. Back in the day of Borisov Film Studios, a stage set workshop was founded. But often the local craftsmen were not able to come up with props fitting the plan of a stylist or a designer. In such a case, they went on a tour of consignment stores, which there were many of in the times of the Soviet Union. The chair was bought at the Odessa consignment store number 30 back in 1963. And you know, it was former nobles who were selling objects on consignment, because this was genuine antique furniture, not fakes or simply props. Although there are manufactured props in the studio. Today they are considered history items with some sort of museum value. But in the films, the furniture is mostly original property. In that black and white film directed by Vsevolod Voronin, the chair played a small role, but soon after other films were shot. The most famous of them are One Chance in a Thousand and Dangerous Tour.
Мне кажется, что я не видел его целую вечность.
Это ты?
Ну и рожа.
And on April 1, 1979, the shooting of D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers started. It ended up in D'Artagnan because of the director's vision. The director felt it in the Cardinal's room. He really liked the chair as it perfectly suited the role of the Cardinal. He saw that this actor could play the role of a Cardinal. It's not like he's playing this role. He is the Cardinal, and the chair is like his abode, that is, his throne, his place. Today, it is difficult to say whether the success of the film ensured the success of this chair, or whether it was the chair that graced the film and complemented the image of the hero himself, Cardinal Richelieu. But the fact remains that the chair appeared in the film because it played a special role. So, this is how things are done in cinema. For example, what does a stylist do? The director brings the script, and then actors read and memorize it. A stylist should portray an image of a person who will be present in this room and in this film. For example, the Cardinal's room. The decoration of the room of this French character was imprinted with Soviet reality. Millions of adolescents and adults who read the same written work by Alexander Dumas and watched its Soviet adaptation did not even suspect or realize that Richelieu was not just an enemy of French King Louis XIV. The Cardinal and his subordinates were nothing other than a veiled image of a particular Soviet organization that in its time terrorized tens of millions of people in the USSR. We're talking about the NKVD. The French Cardinal back then was an equivalent of the NKVD, which was an organization that spied on people. How do we imagine the NKVD? Heavy black leather chairs, terror. The ultimate objective was to make a person feel uneasy and uncomfortable sitting in this room. The production designer was able to accurately convey this unpleasant feeling of being in the office of competent authorities, and thus stir up ill feeling towards Richelieu. And all thanks to one method plus a subtle sense of the situation. When I was watching the film, it struck me that the designer used leather everywhere. It was not just this chair. By the way, those black leather chairs are preserved in the Odessa film studio to this day. But there weren't enough props to make the director's vision entirely a reality. The props were not to be found in Odessa consignment stores either.
Милорд, эти подвески помогут вам хранить память обо мне.
And while director Georgi Jungwald-Hilkevich was able to craft the Queen's pendant overnight using jewelry he bought himself, the furniture was a different story altogether. For example, the writing desk featured in The Three Musketeers was delivered from Leningrad. I have documentary evidence that it was brought to Odessa for the film. People were elated that such a rare prop was found for this film. But even after the film was done and cut, there was a chance that audience may not see it, and the black leather chair would remain the hero of the episodes of the previous films. And all because of the conflict between the director, scriptwriter Mark Vazovsky and the author of lyrics Yuri Rashentsev. The cut film was shelved for a whole year. And it was not until the end of 1979 that the film was screened and it was a raging success. But there were some real bloopers. For example, the age of the actors did not match the age of their counterparts in the novel. The same thing happened with the chair. It was 2 centuries ahead of its time, and it seemed as though some time machine teleported this infamous chair from the 19th century back to the 17th century. Such was the vision of the designer. By the way, there are lots of those things in the film, and when I once pointed them out, people said to me, "Well, now you are giving the masters a hard time." And I retorted, "Well, I know some things are from the 1940s, while they should be from the 18th or even the 17th centuries. This is a typical so-called gag reel, but not everyone will notice it, only professionals. But this thing helped the film authors to portray the image of Richelieu.
Я желал бы видеть эту четверку среди своих друзей.
Not surprisingly, after The Musketeers, the chair appeared in other films. It was requested for the films Tom Sawyer, The Prisoner of Chateau d'If, Musketeers 20 years after. After all, it's a historical object from the 19th century, mostly in its service record. This chair also appeared in the historic films Dangerous Tour and The Green Van. But there was one, no less successful film, in which the appearance of this chair looked absolutely ridiculous. It is a children's musical film from 1979 titled The Adventures of Electronic. It was also in the Odessa film studios The Adventures of Electronic. It was placed in the garage, so it's in that film as well. You can clearly see it. There's also a close-up shot of this chair.
Они спрятали серебряного мальчика в этих холодных каменных стенах. Здесь они хранят большие ценности и знаменитые картины.
Но там же написано в музее.
Все это так. Мы никогда не видели этих картин, хотя только об этом и мечтаем.
I was recreating the garage in the film Adventures of Electronic for one of the festivals. Our new museum will feature it as well. And it amazed me how out of place it was amidst the Soviet junk. It was really out of character in that garage. As odd as it may sound, this illogical fact has a totally logical explanation. Artists have such a thing as a tribute to something or someone. It's when, in commemoration of a particular film or a film director, significant things travel from film to film. Maybe the designer did it in memory of somebody he started to work with. This was the designer's decision. Maybe it was in memory of one of his teachers.
Как он управляется сначала?
Не понял. Повторите.
Despite its venerable age, the chair, which became popular thanks to the film about the Three Musketeers, continues to play its formidable role. And what's interesting, it played such a role in some rather truly surprising films. The last time, a boy from the Karpenko-Kari University was filming his thesis, and I was his designer. And we had a serial killer sitting in that infamous chair with axes and other props beside him. I was the one who captured this chair on film. By the way, not only this chair, but also other exhibits of the museum at any time can be taken out of this place, used in the shooting of a film, and then be returned to its natural habitat in our museum.